What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bourbon of the Week. My name's Chris. I'm going to be your host for today, and if you've been on this channel before, you know we like to have a lot of fun, whether it's our normal Wednesday reviews, our top 5 lists, or our March Madness Bourbon Bracket Single Barrel Edition. We like to keep things light and fun. Today's episode is going to be like that as well, but we're also going to try and keep things educational at the same time. We do have our friends Josh and Aaron at Stuff and Whiskey joining us a little bit later on in the video, so make sure you stick around for that. But today is our top 5 reasons that you should be doing blind tastings. Now, across all of Whiskey YouTube, you probably see people do blind tastings all the time. Maybe you know what it is, maybe you don't. We're going to go over that today as well, but these are the reasons that you should be doing them. My buddy messaged me earlier and told me he was drinking Weller 12 in an old fashioned, and it kind of made me a little bit upset, so I decided to pour some up for tonight's video. Time for the traditional sip. Cheers, y'all. Pretty good. That's right, tonight we're going to be going over the 5 reasons that you should be doing a blind, but let's start with the definition of what a blind is. From my understanding, there are 2 types of blinds when it comes to whiskey tasting. Number 1 is where you know the bottle's involved, but you don't know which glass is which. The way that most people would do this is they'd put a sticker on the bottom of their glass that they cannot see. They'd put the same corresponding sticker on their bottle. They pour those bottles into those glasses. They mix those glasses up. And then once you're done, you would look under that and see which sticker corresponds to which bottle. Now, this is a great way to do a blind, and it's one of the ways that I do it all the time because I don't have anybody that can pour up whiskey for me off my shelf without me knowing which one is which. But there's a second way you can do it that's called a double blind. Now, there's also 2 ways to do a double blind. The harder way is to have somebody within your household pour the blind for you. So they would come down, choose the bottle off your shelf, pour them into the glass, and then they would write it down, put it in an envelope or something like that. So once they walk away, you taste the whiskey and you have no idea what it is, although you still have an indicator depending how many bottles are on your shelf. The second way is a little more interesting. Now, the second way would be a true double blind, and the only way to achieve that is if somebody sent you a sample of whiskey and you had no indicator on what that whiskey could be. You don't know any bottles they have in their collection. You don't know anything from proof to name or distillery on that glass. You just know exactly what's in your glass from what you smell and what you taste. Now that you know what a blind is, let's talk about the 5 reasons that you should be doing them, starting with number 1, eliminate bias. Now, when you drink whiskey blind, you're going to do 2 things right away. You're going to eliminate bias and you're going to eliminate any preconceived notions you may have had about that particular brand and or bottle. When I picked up this bottle of Weller 12, I thought it was going to be the greatest bottle of whiskey that I've ever had. Everybody who's ever talked about it says you have to have this bottle on your shelf. Knowing it was Weller, knowing it was Buffalo Trace, and knowing it was hard to find gave me a preconceived notion that this was going to be a great bottle of whiskey. After my first glass, I was not that impressed. After my second glass, I decided let's put this in a blind to see how it does up against some of my other favorite whiskeys in this proof range. Once I put this whiskey in a blind, it allowed me to judge it solely on its taste and aromas and have nothing to do with the marketing material or the label that went along with it. And let me tell you, it did not do that well. And now Weller 12 is something that I'm not hunting for anymore. So what I'd recommend you do, go pick 3 bottles on your shelf. 1 you don't think you like, 1 you like a lot, and 1 that's right there in the middle. Try all 3 of them blind against each other and see if it falls the same way. But in the meantime, let's get into number 2 right now. Hone your senses. A lot of people, when they first get involved in whiskey, they go onto YouTube or they go onto other social media sites and they see these people like myself talking about these flavors and aromas that they're getting out of whiskey, and they just don't understand where they're getting them from. So they ask all the time, what can I do to hone in on these senses? How can I figure out how to pick out these aromas and these flavors? And I can tell you right now, blind tastings was one of the best ways that I learned to pick out different flavor profiles from different distilleries. When you do a blind tasting, it's going to force you to rely on your senses such as smell and taste, and that's going to allow you to pick out the nuances and the subtleties between the different whiskeys that are in front of you on your table. And there's one way that I truly like to practice this. I'll get 2 glasses of Wild Turkey 101 bourbon, and I'll get 1 glass of Wild Turkey 101 rye. I will then mix those glasses up so I don't know which one is which, and I will try and pick out the rye from the other 2 bourbons. Again, what this is going to force me to do is really hone in on the difference between the 2 glasses over the 1 glass and figure out the nuance between that 51% rye and that 51% corn and pick out the rye over the bourbon. Once you can start to do that easily, move into something a little bit harder like 2 Wild Turkey 101s and a Kentucky Spirit, which is also 101 proof and coming from Wild Turkey, and see if you can figure out the difference there. Those are the first 2 reasons that you should be doing blind tastings, but for reason number 3, we're going to send it over to the king and queen of blind tastings themselves, Josh and Aaron from Stuff and Whiskey, to talk about how you can use blind tastings to expand your palate.
Thanks for having us on, Chris. You know we love blind tastings over at Stuff and Whiskey.
Yeah.
That's what we do. It's our bread and butter, as they say.
I also love bread and butter.
Yeah.
Like the real thing.
Oh, absolutely.
So good.
But when it comes to blind tastings, one of our favorite things about them, and one of the things that we think, the reason why we encourage other people to do them so much is because it can really expand your palate.
Yeah.
Case in point, our channel Genesis is kind of related to this a little bit because I set up a blind tasting bracket based on some of the allocated bottles that I'd gotten my hands on, like E.H. Taylor Small Batch, Blanton's, Weller Antique 107, some things like that. And I thought to myself, I'm going to put this stuff that I've got my hands on up against some of the stuff that just sits on the shelves that haven't really given the time of day. So I went out and bought a bunch of stuff, bought Wild Turkey 101, Rare Breed, didn't give Wild Turkey the time of day before this bracket. And I went through the whole bracket, and at the end of it...
And this was before our channel.
Oh, yeah, this was before the channel. So I said it's the genesis of the channel.
Yeah.
I started out with 32 bottles, half of which were kind of allocated, half of which I went and picked up off the shelf. The end of the bracket, the last 4 bottles, all of them were available products. And most of the allocated stuff lost in the first round.
And you wouldn't have ever tried them if you hadn't had this bracket.
Nope.
Done the bracket.
Turns out I really love Wild Turkey products. It was Russell's Reserve, Rare Breed, 1910, and Michter's Bourbon. Came all the way down to the end of that bracket.
Yeah.
And the finals ended up being Rare Breed versus Russell's Reserve.
Wild.
Really like Wild Turkey, so I expanded my palate by doing that blind tasting bracket. And then we started a whole channel off of it.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. I love blind tastings, and it's expanded my palate in the fact that I've actually started to like international whiskeys. And so it's expanded my palate just past bourbons and ryes. I found that I really like Scotch. I really like peated Scotch.
Yeah.
I have like Irish whiskeys, and I especially like international single malt whiskeys, which I would have
Indian, Welsh
single malt whiskeys. And then I never would have ever tried them had we not had to have them in a blind.
Yeah. And the beauty of that expanding of your palate, kind of the peripheral benefit of it too, is it informs your purchasing decisions.
Yeah.
So it helps you spend your money a little bit more wisely. I was ready to spend all of my monthly fund money on buying Weller Antique 107 at marked up prices because I thought that's what I liked the best. Turns out, I can actually just go buy stuff sitting on the shelf that I like even more. Still like Weller 107 just fine, but I found things that I like even more than that because I was willing to spend $15 on some sample jars and just get into some blind tastings. So can't encourage you guys enough to do that. If you like blind tastings, that's what we do over on Stuff and Whiskey. Again, thanks, Chris, for having us so much.
You.
And we love blind tastings. We love Chris's channel. Hope you guys enjoy this video.
Josh and Aaron, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this video. There's nobody I'd rather have talking about blind tastings than the two of you. I especially related to Aaron talking about expanding her palates into other types of whiskeys because I've been trying to do that myself, and blind tastings is a great way to do it. If you aren't already following Josh and Aaron, their link is in the description below. Make sure you check them out. It's a great follow, I can promise you that. But let's get into number 4 right now, develop your knowledge. One thing that blind tastings can absolutely do is help you develop your knowledge of whiskey. If you can use this experience to compare and contrast similar whiskeys in a blind format, you can truly pick up on different characteristics that different distilleries have to offer. So what you should do is go get 3 different products from your favorite distillery, whether that's 3 different Buffalo Trace products, 3 different Wild Turkey products, or maybe 3 different Brown-Forman products. Put them all up against each other and do it blind. Figure out what they have the same and what they have different, and then pick out which one is your favorite, and you'll figure out it's your favorite because of that difference that they have. This will also allow you to figure out maybe you love Wild Turkey, or maybe you love Brown-Forman, or maybe you don't know which one you love, so you grab one from all 3, you do it blind, and you figure out which characteristics you get from which specific glass, and then you can go out and buy more whiskeys from that particular distillery. Listen, there's an abundant amount of things that you can learn when you drink whiskey blind, but at the end of the day, number 5 is the best piece of advice and the number 1 reason that you should be drinking whiskey blind. Do you know what it is? It's to have a little bit of fun. I think one of the greatest things that the whiskey world has to offer is the people within it. The community in the whiskey world is absolutely one of the most generous communities in the world. I've personally tried whiskeys that I would never have tried otherwise if it weren't for the people I've met, and I've been able to give out some whiskeys that they might not have been able to try if it weren't for me as well. One of my favorite things that I like to do now that I have such an extensive collection is bring my friends over to my house, eliminate bias, pour up 3 or 4 glasses of whiskey, let them hone in on those senses, develop some knowledge once they pick which one it is, expand their palate, and most importantly, we just like to have fun. They pick their favorite one, I tell them more about that bottle as much as I know, and at the end of the day, it's just that community and that togetherness that makes it all worthwhile. So if you're newer to whiskey and you haven't been doing blinds at all, I highly recommend you start. And if you've been doing blinds for a long time and you've been in this whiskey community, let me know in the comment section below your favorite challenge to do when you pour up your blinds. But in the meantime, make sure you check me out on Instagram at Bourbon of the Week. Go click that follow button over there. Check out Josh and Aaron here on YouTube at Stuff and Whiskey. That link in the description below. Also down there, you'll find my Patreon link as well as my Discord link. Come chat with us 24/7 and come check out some cool special perks just for Patreons. In the meantime, please don't drink and drive. Always drink responsibly and stay healthy, stay happy, stay drinking. Cheers, y'all. Still all right.